You're watching the Alabama Weather Network.
Good morning. I'm meteorologist Drew McCombs with the Alabama Weather Network, and this is your Saturday morning weather briefing for Saturday, September the 27th. And what we're watching is a mostly dry and nice weekend. We've had this cold front that's moved through the state, and maybe a few leftover showers in the eastern part of the state today, but generally expect to be dry, and it's going to be fairly nice and maybe a little bit cooler. Had a little bit of a cool start as far as this morning, but a little bit cooler this afternoon than we've been here recently. But we will start to kind of warm back up and have a pretty calm start for this coming week. And then we're watching potential tropical cyclone 9. That is the system that could impact, or most likely will impact, the Carolinas and the Georgia coast as we get into the early part of this coming week. There's still a lot of uncertainty with that, so we'll kind of unpack that as we go here. And let's see what happens as far as our sky cams. And we've got some beautiful sunrises. We've got a beautiful sunrise happening right now. It's in Ardmore. It's looking really nice there. It's 60 degrees, so got a pretty cool start there in the northern part of the state with the dew points down in the upper 50s. So again, the northern part of the state's gotten the biggest impact from the cold front so far, as far as just having lower humidity and a little bit cooler morning here. You can see the wind is just pretty light at this point. Just a beautiful look there at the sunrise. And as we continue to move across the state, or further south, Alabaster, seeing a little bit of fog there, not super dense, but a little bit of fog trying to form there close to the lake there. It's 65 degrees there. Dew point's 64, so not quite as dry as you move further to the south, but a beautiful view there, as you can see. And as we continue to move around the state, Hoover, again, beautiful look there, looking at the sunrise. And again, I think I see a little bit of patchy fog as well. We've just got a dense fog advisory we'll show you here in a second in the northeastern part of the state. But the rest of the state, though there is some fog around, hasn't reached the criteria for that. Abbeville, down in the southeast, though, that looks pretty thick, actually. You got some fog, and you can see just some of the trees kind of peeking over the top of it there. But that's a pretty cool look there in Abbeville from the tower there. It's 66 degrees, and the dew point's at 66. So again, we've gotten the dry air mass even that far southeast, but not quite as dry to the far north. And even in Spanish Fort, the dew point's at 66 degrees. Beautiful view there looking across the bay, and the temperature's down into the upper 60s. So a fairly refreshing start in most of the state. And our last camera here, beautiful view there looking towards the east from Orange Beach. It's 72 degrees. You can see the boats are already heading out Perdido Pass, and just a really, really nice start there at the beach. All right, so again, our only alerts that are in effect right now are basically just this dense fog advisory that's in effect until 9 a.m. So we expect that fog will start to mix out in the next couple of hours, and that's for Madison County, Marshall County, Jackson County, and DeKalb counties. Those are the only counties in the northeastern corner of the state that are included in this. So again, nothing else going on. It's very calm elsewhere across the state outside of that patchy fog here and there. Looking at the southeast radar here, or the U.S. radar over the southeast, so you can see we're basically cleared out here. There might be a tiny little isolated shower in the far southeastern corner as the front has sort of just barely kind of moved past that area. As you can see, there are fairly widespread showers over in both North Carolina and South Carolina near Charlotte, moving towards Raleigh. Some heavier storms off the coast out over the Atlantic, and then down in Florida, you've got a few showers and thunderstorms there near Gainesville, kind of in the northern peninsula of Florida, but it's pretty calm back off to our west, and we expect that to continue to stay that way here over the short term. Closer look here again, waking up with maybe there might be a few clouds lingering in the eastern part of the state, where you've got a few showers that are lingering in far in western Georgia, and then that far southeastern corner of Alabama. But other than that, we are very calm across the state this morning. And temperatures, again, have gotten down in the upper 50s, especially in the northwestern corner of the state. So it's 58 in Hamilton. It's 61 in Coleman, and 61 in Gadsden as well. And even all the way down farther to the south, it's gotten down to 62 in Thomasville, 64 in Atmore. So pretty nice, relatively cool start. Especially compared to what we've seen here in the most recent days. And looking at the dew points, you can see evidence of that front that has passed through. But again, it hasn't been a big, huge air mass change across the entire state like we have seen with a few of those fronts here in the last couple of weeks. Not quite as much of that happening. So we're down into the 50s for dew points in the northwest corner, but we're still mostly 60s elsewhere. But still, it's still a welcome change from where we had gotten over the last several days, where we were up into the 70s as we've gotten the rainfall coming in. But so generally a fairly more refreshing start compared to recent times. Looking at our futurecast, so showing a few of those just very small light showers potentially this morning. Now, as we get into this afternoon, there's still the front is still nearby enough that there could be a few more spotty showers that form, especially in the kind of the far eastern edge of the state. But the vast majority of the state will stay dry today and just have sunshine, a mixture of sunshine and clouds, and again, fairly comfortable temperatures out there. So it should be a pretty nice day across the state for most folks, and even the people who get a shower. It should be fairly brief, and it should be a nice day really across the entire state. Looks like a calm night tonight, so it'll be a good night to get out. If you've got any plans, it should be great for that. And then as we get into Sunday afternoon, here's where we see a little bit of a conflict in some of the models we've been looking at, but from the eastern side of the state, you start to see a little bit of an easterly flow coming in and could introduce a few showers in the southern part of the state, especially by Sunday afternoon. Again, looking at this is very isolated, light, and most places, again, will be staying dry. So really just the weekend overall looks very calm and nice across the board. So you can see here as we get into Sunday night, looks pretty calm as well. And it, again, should be a nice weekend for outdoor plans in general. As we get into Monday afternoon, again, we still might have a spot shower or two if this easterly flow really does begin to verify. And that's where we get into the discussion of what happens with the potential tropical cyclone 9, which will eventually be Imelda, most likely, and how does that impact our weather? How does that potentially increase our rain chances from the east as it gets closer to the coast? So again, there's still a good bit of uncertainty with that we'll talk about here in a second. As far as the current alerts across the entire country, pretty calm out there. We've got our dense fog advisory, got a couple of flood watches up there in Virginia, air quality advisory there in the Houston area, some flood watches in Southern California. But generally, there's some fire weather warnings in the northern part of California. But other than that, it's pretty calm across the country. Looking at the surface analysis here with the satellite and radar, again, you can see that front that has just kind of cleared the area, but it's really close to the southeastern corner, and that's why you're getting those just a few light sprinkles there in the southeastern corner of the state this morning. But that'll continue to push slowly to the east, so that but because it's sort of beginning to stall. You can see there it's represented as a stationary boundary on the surface analysis here. That's because it's beginning to stall, and we may start to get a bit of an easterly flow. That's why we still may have a few leftover showers over the next couple of afternoons. But you can see high pressure is building in from the northwest, which will help keep a lid on things. And as you look at the rest of the country, high pressure building into the northeastern part of the state, into New England. Looks like a low pressure up in Canada dragging a front through parts of the northern plains and into the Midwest, but not really any precipitation along it. Looks like a dry front at this point. High pressure building in behind that, so it looks pretty calm in a good portion of the northwestern part of the country, outside of a front approaching into the far Pacific Northwest, bringing maybe a few showers into northwestern Washington, and then a few showers coming into parts of New Mexico and western Texas, but generally pretty calm across the country. Severe weather outlook, you can see the calmness here as well. There's no forecast organized severe weather anywhere across the country for today. Same thing goes for tomorrow. So good thing to see. We don't expect to have any issues with that. Excessive rainfall potential for today. To our east, there's a marginal risk of some heavier showers in parts of Georgia, the Carolinas, up through Virginia. You've got parts of Florida as well. Looks like the better chance is going to be coastal North Carolina, and also Virginia has that yellow slight risk. And then back to the southwest, or back to the west, you can see there are some slight yellow regions there in parts of New Mexico, and also Southern California and western Arizona. So again, those places could get a little bit more rain today. All right, here's the tropics, where things are kind of getting interesting here. Obviously, we've got Hurricane Humberto, which is a strong Category 4 hurricane at this point. In many cases, that would be the main show in a lot of situations, but because this storm is forecast to not impact the U.S. directly, it will have some impact as it passes Bermuda, although it doesn't look like extremely significant, but it's going to stay far enough out to sea that it will not be a major player, other than how it might help steer the potential tropical cyclone that we'll be talking about. But here's a look at the NHC 4 a.m. advisory for Humberto. You can see it's again, Category 4, 145 mile per hour sustained winds. 938 millibar is our pressure. Moving pretty slowly west at 6 miles per hour. And as we put the forecast into motion here, expected to potentially get to Category 5 status as we get into early tomorrow morning, and then still staying as a strong Category 4 hurricane through the early part of next week. But all the models are on board with this turning out to see, and again, going kind of west of Bermuda, maybe having a little bit more impact, or likely having a little bit more impact on Bermuda than the other recent hurricanes that have passed nearby there, as it's going kind of to the west of Bermuda in this situation. But again, staying well enough off the East Coast that it will not be a major player outside of maybe sending some swells and some rip current risks to the East Coast, kind of like we've seen with the other recent hurricanes passing in this general vicinity. All right, so taking a look at the development chance for the next 7 days. So really the main thing we're going to be paying attention to is going to be that western area of showers and thunderstorms there that's beginning to try to organize itself over the eastern end of Cuba into parts of Bahamas. And so that's got a 90% chance of developing over the next week and also over the next couple of days. And with all of that said, it has been designated as potential tropical cyclone 9. So it's not officially a tropical depression yet, but because it has the potential to have some impacts to the U.S., they've gone ahead and made it into a potential tropical cyclone and started issuing advisories on it, and also a forecast for it. So this is the latest forecast for potential tropical cyclone 9. Again, once this becomes a tropical storm, which it should in the next 12 to 24 hours, it will be Tropical Storm Imelda. So it's going to be the ice storm. And you can see, again, it's a depression right now with sustained winds at 35 miles per hour. And it's moving towards the northwest at 7 miles per hour. Expected as we get again into early tomorrow morning, we'll likely have a tropical storm on our hands at that point, and then it will be kind of slowly making its way through the Bahamas as a tropical storm, slowly strengthening, and then by the time we get to Monday and into Tuesday, likely we'll have a Category 1 hurricane, or at least a strong tropical storm that will be approaching the Carolinas. Now, again, the models are still trying to come into a consensus of what happens with this. The steering currents are going to be kind of collapsing with this. So what's looking more and more likely now, and the NHC, the latest forecaster is kind of is showing this, that it could very well not make landfall officially, even though it'll get close enough to the coast that it's going to cause some impacts, especially in the Georgia coast and the Carolina coasts. Especially the Carolinas looking more likely to have a lot of rain impacts with this, even if it doesn't officially make landfall. But at least the NHC forecaster now is kind of calling more for a potential situation where there isn't an official landfall, but you can see that the coast of South Carolina and parts of the southern part of North Carolina and also the coastal Georgia is still within that cone of uncertainty, the red area there, which means the landfall is still on the table, but at least in the most recent runs of the ensembles and the deterministic models are heading in the direction of it moving out to sea. So again, we'll take a look at some of this here. And of course, we'll also have a tropical update that you can watch. We'll go in a little bit more detail. But looking at our forecast atmospheric moisture from the GFS, again, you can see Humberto on the right. And then as we get into tomorrow, we see a more development with what will become Imelda. So by Monday, expecting to have a tropical storm, most likely sitting off the east coast of Florida. A Florida landfall doesn't look very likely. Not many of the models are really showing something like that. But then again, you see with the GFS that it approaches the Georgia and South Carolina coast and then starts to move back off towards the east before actually making landfall. Again, even if that is the case, that it doesn't make landfall, there still will be some impacts as far as probably tropical storm force winds around the coast. And the rain really looks like to be the main impact with this, where there could be over 6 inches of rain, maybe in some spots could be up to 12 inches of rain in some of the areas, the coastal areas of South Carolina and North Carolina. So that really, the rainfall looks like it's likely going to be the main impact with this, whether it makes landfall officially or not. So again, that's one of the things you always have to remember with tropical systems, is that the impacts can be pretty widespread, even if you actually don't have official landfall of the eye of the storm itself. And again, you see that it continues to push it away as we get later into next week. Looking at, this is the European model, and so we're looking at our kind of mid-level setup for the European model. And again, as we get into Tuesday afternoon, showing the system kind of lurking off the Carolina coast, but it also pushes it out pretty quickly after that as you get into later next week, and it never actually makes landfall either. So again, models seem to be moving in that direction. Still, there is possibility for change, and we'll continue to watch it, but that's what it's looking like at this point. As far as the tropical, or as far as the moisture that is going to be part of this and how that could potentially impact us, you'll notice that we're in a relatively dry air mass. We're not in the blues there, but we're in some of the greens. We've gotten a good bit of the moisture pushed out with this cold front so that we're drying out a good bit. But as we put this into motion, you'll start to see, and again, this is the GFS, which you'll see the tropical systems moving up and see a Imelda coming up the eastern coast of Florida. And as that happens, we get more moisture starting to be kind of shunted into our areas. We get into the middle part of next week. Again, all of this could be subject to change. We may not get that much. We may get a little bit more. But what that could mean, depending on where Imelda actually goes, how far it actually goes to the west, will have an impact on whether we see increased rain chances. And that really would be the main thing here. We wouldn't expect any sort of significant rainfall like the coasts of the Carolinas and Georgia we'll see with this. It would just be more of an enhancement of our rain chances, which again we could use still around here despite our rain in the last 2 days or so. So again, we'll continue to watch that as we get into late next week and see if that does increase our chances of rain. It's one of the possibilities on the board, so we will continue to watch that. All right, here's a look at the kind of the long-range forecast from the GFS. Again, you can see here it takes Imelda up to the coast and then starts to turn it away, brings a few showers into our area as part of that, but generally doesn't make it look all that wet in Alabama. As we move on into the 6 to 8 day forecast, maybe showing a little bit more showers late next week. As the storm has kind of moved away, but we still have some leftover moisture from it and some easterly flow, showing actually a decent amount of rain in the southern part of the state as we get into late next week, early next weekend. Again, this is all a long ways out, so this is not a forecast at this point. This is just one of the possibilities that we could see. And then as we get past that into the longer range, it actually shows some fairly dry conditions for a little while and getting back kind of underneath a ridge, which would mean probably warmer than normal and dry, and unfortunately not seeing a big chance of any sort of cool fall front coming in the next week or two. I mean, this gets us out basically 2 weeks out, and so far still not seeing evidence of a big cool down that a lot of times we like to see when we get into October with fall. So still it'll be coming eventually, but it may be a little while before we can get that first good solid front in here. Rain totals over the past week, it's been good in some spots. Not everybody's gotten a whole lot, but you can see in some spots we've gotten close to 3-4 inches, or we've definitely seen more than that in some spots, especially in the northern part of the state. And then we've seen fairly widespread amounts, at least at an inch, and in some cases more than that, 2 inches in many spots. Unfortunately, in kind of the sort of south central part of the state, did not really get a whole lot. So places like Demopolis and Selma and Clanton did not really get a ton of rain. They got a little bit, got about 1/4 of an inch. Montgomery also only got about 1/2 inch. So that little corridor in the south central part of the state did not do as well with this event, unfortunately. So those places will continue to see their drought conditions get worsen probably over the next week or so. And looking at our percent of normal rain, this is over the last 30 days. Again, you can see that especially that south central area is getting into the 25, 28% range, 19% ranges. And places where there has been rain are closer to normal, but still relatively dry, even with that, even with the recent rain here. Still pretty dry over the last month over most of the state. And our rainfall outlook through Friday, again, this is subject to change depending on what happens with Imelda. And you can see the significant rainfall further to the east with Imelda that will be happening pretty, with a pretty high degree of certainty that there's going to be significant rainfall over there. But right now, at least, the eastern edge of the state not showing much at all through Friday. But again, we'll see if that changes a little bit as we move further along. All right, here's your 7-day forecast for North Alabama. So expect to be a little bit cooler today, highs on the into the upper 80s with a fairly cool start this morning. Shower chances are very minimal, again, mainly on the eastern side of the state over the next couple of days. We do kind of warm back up a little bit, especially in the afternoons as we get into early next week, but staying fairly calm. Lows are still going to be in the 60s, and then things get a lot more uncertain as we move into late next week. And again, a lot of that depends on what happens with Imelda. Do see some opportunity maybe to cool down a little bit more as we get into late next week. But again, we'll see what happens with that. South Alabama, again, expecting to be a little bit cooler today than it has been in the recent week or so. It'll be in the upper 80s for the highs. Again, very small chance of any sort of rain over the next several days. And we do expect to warm up a little bit as we get into early next week. Could see low 90s in many spots, especially kind of not right along the coast, but a little bit inland into parts of the southern part of the state. And again, we'll kind of see what happens with the melta to see where we go as we get mid and later part of the week. Well, that is your weather briefing for this morning. We appreciate you watching us as always on the Alabama Weather Network.